It was 11:51 p.m. in my Chicago apartment when my phone lit up. An email from my mother. Jennifer, the subject line read, followed by one word. Workshop. My heart sank. The email was brief. Venus, Kevin and I have decided we're selling the workshop to his investors. I need you to sign the papers to release your co-ownership from your father's will. This is for my future. Betrayal. Cold and instant, hit before I could even process it. A second email arrived, this time from a law firm I didn't recognize. On behalf of our client, Kevin Doyle, we are authorized to offer you a sum of $10,000 for your full and immediate release of all claims. $10,000 from my father Michael's entire life's work. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Especially when a loved one's legacy is threatened? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to know if you've ever felt that way. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel the hot flush of anger I expected. Instead, a cold, sharp clarity settled over me. This wasn't family drama. This was attempted theft. I ignored the $10,000 insult. At 12:03 a.m., exactly 12 minutes after my mother's email, I was on the phone with Robert Chen, my father's oldest friend and our family's lawyer. It went to voicemail, but I didn't hesitate. Robert, it's Venus Morgan. I'm sorry for the hour, but it's happening. They're trying to sell the workshop. They're in breach. My voice was calm and steady. Activate the artisan clauses immediately. Freeze all transactions, all assets. I'm on the first flight to Maine in the morning. I hung up, opened my laptop, booked a one-way ticket from Chicago to Portland, and then opened my encrypted files. You see, they made a critical mistake. They thought I was the estranged daughter, the one who ran off to the big city to become a successful architect and forget about them. But they forgot I was also the silent architect. They forgot who co-signed the original expansion loan with my father, Michael, when no bank would give him the time of day. They forgot who pored over the legal contracts with him, who drafted the blueprints for the new wing, and who insisted on that tiny ironclad clause, the artisan clause, a little provision I'd slipped in specifying that the property could only be used for master-level, custom craft. It legally forbade any mass production, any cheap knockoffs. It was a fail-safe designed to protect my father's art from a world that valued speed over soul. I just never imagined I'd have to use it to protect him from his own wife. They also conveniently forgot about the last 3 years. After Dad died, my mother couldn't handle the finances. The workshop, his legacy, was 2 months from a tax auction. I got the notice. I didn't call her. I didn't lecture her. I just paid it. $12,000 wired from my Chicago account. I'd been paying the property taxes in secret ever since. They saw me as the daughter who left. They were about to meet the partner who never did. But the $12,000 in taxes was just maintenance. That wasn't the real investment. What they truly forgot, what they had so easily erased from memory, was the $85,000 structural restoration I'd funded 4 years ago, right after Dad died and just before Kevin slithered into my mother's life. Dad and I designed it together. He called it the Foundation Project. He knew the main workshop, built in the 1940s, was failing. The sea air was rotting the main support beams, the roof was sagging. He was a master boat builder, but he wasn't an engineer. I was. I flew home 3 weekends in a row. I took structural surveys, drew up the architectural plans, hired the contractors myself, and I paid for all of it. $85,000. It wasn't a gift, it was an investment in our shared legacy. I sent my mother the paid invoices, a clear paper trail, thinking I was protecting her future, protecting our future. I was naive. I thought I was protecting the workshop from the world, not from my own mother. The next morning, my phone erupted. It was Jennifer, my mother. I was in a cab from the airport, the cold Maine coastline whipping past the window. I answered. It wasn't a hello, it was a shriek. Venus, what did you do? What did you do? Robert Chen froze the accounts. Kevin's investors are furious. He's going to lose the deal. You're destroying everything. I kept my voice perfectly level. I'm protecting what Dad built. What Dad built, she scoffed, her voice dripping with panic I'd never heard before. Dad is gone, Venus. This is about my future, my life. You have your fancy life in Chicago. What do you care? Before I could answer, the phone fumbled. A muffled, angry voice cut through. Kevin. You think you're smart, don't you, you little brat? You think you can just waltz in here with your lawyer? That workshop is mine. I'm the one who's been running it. Running it into the ground, you mean? I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. You'll regret this. You're gonna get nothing. You hear me? Nothing. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone humming in my hand. The anger still wasn't hot. It was crystalline, precise. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. A Facebook notification. My grandmother, Susan, had tagged me in a post. It was from my mother, a public post on the small town's community page. It's just so sad when children forget who raised them, when they become so successful and cold-hearted that they try to steal their own mother's future right out of under her. Please pray for us. We are being attacked by our own family. That was it. That was the moment the last thread of daughterly obligation snapped. She hadn't just chosen him over me. She had chosen him over my father's memory. And she had just given me permission to wage total, uncompromising war. I landed in Portland and met Robert Chen at his office. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was practically my uncle. The man who'd held me on his shoulders at the boatyard picnics. Now, his face was grim, but his eyes were sharp. Venus, he said, sliding a thick document across his desk, pointing to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. The artisan clause. It's beautiful. The property shall be used exclusively for the purpose of master-level custom craft. Any mass production or sale of prefabricated goods shall be considered a material breach of this deed. Robert leaned back. Kevin Doyle isn't a boat builder. He's a kit assembler.
He's been buying cheap fiberglass hulls from overseas and passing them off as Morgan-inspired designs. He's not creating, he's counterfeiting. The validation was cold, sharp, and satisfying. So the injunction holds, I said. It wasn't a question. It holds, Robert confirmed. But to win the lawsuit, we need to prove damages. Not just breach of contract, but desecration of the legacy the clause was designed to protect. Then we need to do an audit, I said, my voice all architect, controlled and precise. A legal audit. We drove to the workshop, my childhood home. I hadn't been back in 4 years, not since before Kevin. The house itself looked neglected. The custom trim Dad had milled by hand was peeling. The garden had been replaced with gravel. But it was the workshop that made my blood run cold. Kevin was there, standing by the bay doors, a beer in his hand. He smirked when he saw me. The conquering hero returns. Come to see what a real business looks like? I ignored him, my eyes scanning the room. I felt like I was walking through a crime scene. Where is it? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Where's what? The lathe. Dad's workbench, the one he built from the salvaged mast of the Albatross. Kevin gestured with his beer toward a pile of scrap wood in the corner. That old piece of junk rotted out. Had to tear it out. Made space for the new finishing station. He pointed to a cheap particle board table stained with sloppy varnish. I pulled out my phone. Not to cry, not to scream. I opened the camera. Robert, I said, my voice clinical. Please document. I began my audit. My father's hand-forged tools, the ones his father gave him, were gone from the wall, replaced with cheap, plastic-handled power tools. The pegboard where he'd outlined each tool in black marker was empty. The beautiful, exposed oak beams overhead, the ones that I'd helped him sand and oil, were covered in a thick, hideous coat of gray paint. And in the main bay, where the half-finished hull of a custom schooner had sat for a decade, my father's unfinished masterpiece, it was gone. In its place were 3 identical fiberglass motorboat shells, the cheap kits Robert had mentioned. The air smelled of toxic resin and chemical solvents, not sawdust and cedar. This wasn't neglect. This was extermination. He wasn't just running a new business. He was deliberately erasing every trace of my father. "He's not just in breach of contract," I said to Robert, loud enough for Kevin to hear. I photographed the sloppy paint, the damaged floor where the workbench had been ripped out. "He's committing fraud. Stolen craft. He's using my father's name, Morgan Boats, to sell this garbage." Kevin's face turned purple. "You can't prove a damn thing. This is progress." "We'll see," I said, turning to Robert. "Get a full accounting. I want to know where every one of my father's original blueprints is. And I want to know where every penny from the sale of his tools went." Then I turned back to Kevin. "You should have taken the $10,000. I thought the fight was about the artisan clause. I thought I was just battling a con man over a breach of contract. I was wrong. It was so much worse. Robert called me that evening at my hotel. His voice was different. The steady, calm lawyer was gone. He sounded shaken. "Venus, I found it. It's not just a breach. It's criminal." I sat down. "What do you mean?" "The $85,000 restoration loan," he said, his voice tight. "The money you wired 4 years ago, it never went to the contractors. Kevin intercepted it." I couldn't breathe. "He stole it?" "He did one better," Robert said with disgust. "He convinced your mother to pay the contractors from her own savings, telling her it was just a short-term cash flow issue. Then he took your $85,000 and used it to pay off his personal gambling debts. But that's not even the worst part." I waited, my knuckles white around the phone. "He used the cleared property, the one you had just invested in, to take out a new $85,000 business loan. He mortgaged your father's legacy all over again." "But he can't," I said, my mind racing. "I'm co-owner. I never signed anything." "He forged your mother's signature on the loan documents. And Venus, the bank records show he tried to forge yours too. They flagged the signature mismatch, which is why he had to go to a private lender. But the intent is there. This is bank fraud, forgery, larceny." The floor dropped out from under me. This wasn't about cheap fiberglass. This was a systematic plot to gut our family and sell its bones. "How?" I whispered, the word barely audible. How could she let this happen? How could she be so blind? I heard Robert sigh. "She wasn't blind, Venus. She was trapped. And that's the hardest part to understand, isn't it? We look at people like your mother, Jennifer, and we scream, 'How could you be so stupid?' But it isn't stupidity. It's a psychological trap. It's called emotional dependency. When my father died, he didn't just leave a hole in her life. He left a void of validation. She didn't just lose a husband, she lost her entire sense of self. And then Kevin arrived. Charming, attentive, making her feel seen again. By the time his mask slipped, by the time the drinking and the bad investments started, she was already in too deep. Her fear of being alone again was stronger than her fear of him. He isolated her, told her her family didn't care, told her I didn't care. He made her believe he was the only thing standing between her and total loneliness. It's not weakness, not in the way most people think. It's a form of learned helplessness, when you become so convinced there's no way out that you just stop fighting. You turn into a willing victim, a co-signer to your own downfall, all for the comfort of having someone to eat dinner with. I understood that. But understanding and forgiving are two very different things. He didn't just fraud a bank. I told Robert, the cold clarity returning to my voice. He preyed on a grieving widow. He targeted my family. "Venus, what are you asking me to do?" Robert asked quietly. "File it. All of it. The breach of contract, the civil suit for damages, and the criminal complaint for forgery and fraud. Send everything to the district attorney. No more negotiations. The war had shifted, and I was about to end it. The final confrontation was set. Robert, the local sheriff, a man who had known my father his entire life, rode with me as we pulled up to the workshop. They were there, just as Robert predicted. Kevin and Jennifer weren't packing. They were moving equipment, trying to load 2 fiberglass boat kits onto a flatbed trailer before the injunction arrived. They were liquidating the assets. Kevin saw us. His face, already red from drinking, darkened to a blotchy purple. "You!" he shouted, pointing at me. "You can't be here. This is my property. I have investors waiting." "This is not your property," I said, my voice calm and steady. I stepped out of the car, holding a single folder. The sheriff stood beside me, one hand resting easily on his belt. "I have a deal. You can't do this. This is my business," Kevin roared, stepping toward me. "It was never your business," I replied, raising the document Robert had printed. It was his. I let him see the highlighted words, the artisan clause my father and I had written, the one Kevin violated the moment he brought his cheap plastic garbage onto my father's land. "The injunction is absolute," I said. "You've been in breach for 3 years." Kevin's eyes darted from me to the sheriff and back again. He looked like a cornered animal, but before he could lunge, my mother came running from the house, her face a mess of tears and panic. She grabbed my arm. "Venus, no! Please, honey, don't do this!" I looked at her, my face like stone. "We'll lose everything!" she cried, her voice cracking. "Kevin was trying to build us a future." "This," I said, gesturing toward the fiberglass holes, "is not a future. It's a desecration." "Please," she begged, clutching my jacket. "If you ever loved me, do this for me. Do it for your mother." That was the moment the air went still. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger. "I'm not doing this to you, Jennifer. I'm doing this for Dad." I pulled my arm free, turned to the sheriff, and handed him the second folder, the thick one. "This is the court injunction. And this," I tapped the binder, "is the criminal complaint, evidence of bank fraud, forgery, and the theft of an $85,000 loan." My mother went pale. Kevin just stared, realization dawning too late. The sheriff glanced at the top page, then at Kevin. "Kevin Doyle, you're under arrest for fraud and forgery." It was like a dam burst. Kevin exploded, screaming, cursing at me, at my mother, at the sheriff, calling me names I won't repeat. As the sheriff cuffed him and read his rights, Kevin still spat threats. "You'll get nothing. I'll burn it all before I let you have it." The sheriff pushed him into the back of the cruiser. My mother collapsed. She sank to the gravel driveway, sobbing. A hollow, broken sound. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Instead, I turned toward the workshop, to the empty space on the floor where my father's workbench had stood for 30 years. The oil stains, the bolt holes, all that remained of the place where he taught me to use a compass, to respect the grain of the wood. The heart of his craft, torn out and sold for scrap. I took a breath. "Goodbye, Jennifer." Then I turned, got into my car, and drove away, leaving her among the ruins. Kevin was convicted on all counts: forgery, fraud, and larceny. His carefully crafted image collapsed overnight. The local paper ran a story about the con man who tried to steal the Morgan Boatyard legacy. He was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. My mother, Jennifer, wasn't charged. Robert and I argued about it, but the DA saw her as a victim of financial and emotional abuse. She was broken. With Kevin gone, the fog of her dependency began to lift, replaced by a crushing wave of shame. She moved in with her sister and, for the first time in her life, started therapy. Our relationship isn't fixed. I don't know if it ever will be, but it's quiet. I spent the next month in Maine, not in the house, but in the workshop. The stench of resin and cheap paint lingered. I hired a crew and we began the purge. We tore out the particle board tables. We stripped the gray paint from the oak beams. We scrubbed the floors, trying to erase the stains left by Kevin's shoddy work. In the final day, while sweeping debris from under the main floorboards, my broom hit something solid. My heart pounded. I grabbed a crowbar and pried it up. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth and nestled into a hand-cut recess in the foundation, was my father's tool roll. His hand-forged chisels, his custom-handled mallets, the brass and rosewood marking gauge he had made himself. The tools Kevin had called rotted junk. He hadn't sold them. He just hadn't been smart enough to find them. I sat on the dusty floor, holding the cold steel in my hands, and I finally cried. Looking around at the empty workshop, I thought about the 11 years I'd spent away in Chicago. For so long, I carried the guilt of leaving, convinced I was the cold daughter, the one who ran. But sitting there, holding my father's legacy, I finally understood. We're taught that loyalty to family is sacred, that cutting ties, even toxic ones, is betrayal. But sometimes leaving isn't abandonment, it's survival. It's not running from something, it's running toward the version of yourself strong enough to endure the war. I had to leave. I had to go to Chicago. I had to build my own armor, my own strength, so that when the time came, I could return and fight the war they had declared on me. My distance wasn't weakness, it was training. I stood and walked to the only surviving workbench, the drafting table my father and I built together. I unrolled his original blueprints for the schooner he never finished. The ink was still sharp, the lines still perfect. Beside them, I unrolled my own, designs I had carried in my mind for years. The title block read simply, "The Michael Morgan Institute of Artisan Craft." The workshop was quiet now. No longer a tomb, but a foundation. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe. But more importantly, tell me what you think. What is real justice? Is it punishment or is it restoration? Let me know in the comments. I read them all, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.